All right, welcome into Carp's Corner. Week 12, college football in the books. Week 13 of the NFL in the books. A lot of great stuff happening. Exciting time. So we're sitting here. We got Thanksgiving up on the horizon. Later in this week, the second episode, we'll get into some of my favorite Thanksgiving meals and some of the favorite dishes that I like to celebrate on Thanksgiving. And with that comes, rivalry weekend. That's coming up, college football. We've got some NFL games, but this is probably my favorite week of the year. And here's why. Usually have great games coming up, Saturday, Sunday. You lead into this. You've got Thanksgiving on a Thursday. You're going to have college and football and NFL football wrapped all around Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You get Thanksgiving there. You get to enjoy it. You get all the leftovers. You sit down, you hang out with your family, get to have some drinks, enjoy the time, and really kind of dive on into all of that. And then you get, college football, the big games on Saturday, and it's right on the cusp leading in to conference championship weekend. And so we'll get into that later this week. But I think it's so fantastic. And then obviously you get the NFL on Sunday. So that's going to be sitting there for you as well. So a lot of great things that are going to be there, but it's my favorite weekend. Black Friday, you can get up if you want to after Thanksgiving, dive into the shopping. And then it's the Christmas season. It's bowl season. It's everything else. Like you put the bow on college football season this weekend and you get championship Saturday, the following, and then it's going on in the bowl season and playoffs. And the NFL is kind of coming into form right now. So everything right there is right in front of you. You'll love to see it. And it's really, really exciting. My favorite week of the year. And probably didn't fully appreciate it when I was younger. When you're a kid, like you want Christmas, you want the gifts. But as you get older, it's like, okay, this is the good stuff. And there's all these things available to you right now. I got a little bit of NFL, a lot of college this week. I want to get into. We can start with the NFL first and dive in a little bit. Dallas Cowboys took on the Kansas City Chiefs yesterday, and Kansas City looking to play a little better. People have these questions. Did they get figured out? Is the NFL caught up with the Kansas City Chiefs? Has Andy Reid lost it? Is Pat Mahomes, is he in a slump? Is he going to be able to bounce back? Listen, folks, NFL is a roller coaster each and every week. You're going to go through some swoons. The question is, if you're a great team, what do those swoons look like? Is it a situation where you're swooning and you're going over a 4-game stretch, 0-4 or 1-3? Or can you kind of flatten it out? Maybe more of a 2-2, and maybe you lose a game to a bad team. Maybe you don't look great in one of your wins, but you'll always take a bad win over a good loss because those wins count. They're stacked up. It's not the college football playoff. There is no selection committee. A win is a win is a win in the NFL. So you always take that. So I was never a believer, was never a buyer into Kansas City that they were falling apart. Did I think they were the prohibitive, overwhelming Super Bowl favorite anymore? I could have slid them off that a little bit. But if you're telling me that I didn't think they'd be in the second round of the playoffs, well, couldn't get there with you. They still got a lot of work to do and a lot of things, but you're beginning to see them come back into focus. Offensively, 19 points, nothing to write home about. But defensively, they played much better. And it starts with one guy. And this one guy might be the most impactful player on the defensive side of the football to his team in the NFL. And I know Aaron Donald's great, and I look around and I see all these great defensive players. But just over the last 3 or 4 years, when Chris Jones is on the field, Kansas City's a different team. They're a different team defensively, and that spills over into the confidence on their offense. It's unbelievable the difference he makes. I mean, he was all over the backfield, sacking Dak Prescott everywhere. But even outside of that, the attention that he draws, what he's able to do in the run game, you're going to rarely find a guy who's an interior defensive lineman that can do it. And I know Aaron Donald does it, and people are going to tell me he's better. And I agree with you. I think Aaron Donald is an unbelievable talent, best defensive lineman in the NFL, maybe best defensive player. But my argument is nobody is more impactful because you look at that offense and they're going to score points. They'll get that thing figured out. But when Chris Jones is out there, it's tough, man. It's tough to throw it. It's tough to run it. And he is a tone setter. He is someone that is just more important and greater than just simply him being on the field with what he is able to do. And so they get the 19-9 win. And so that's the Chiefs side of it. Flip over and look at the Cowboys side of it. What is Dallas doing? You got Dak back. He looked all right. He was under siege. Here's the real deal. You had Amari Cooper out of the game. He wasn't playing. CeeDee Lamb goes out with a concussion. You're missing 2 of your 3 best receivers. You're going against a team, and believe me, Zach Martin, there were some times, I think he's one of the premier guards. Chris Jones got the best of him. He's an elite player. And so that's a little bit of the things that you're having to deal with on this Cowboys team is your best players were either out or maybe they weren't playing their best ball. Don't panic. Don't panic, Cowboys fans. If you're going to sit here and go from, hey, they're capable to win a Super Bowl, maybe they're the Super Bowl favorite in the NFC, you can't sit here after one game, a game in which they lost by 10 points. And realistically, they put together some drives. They just weren't able to get the critical third down or be able to get down and score touchdowns. You score another touchdown, maybe 2, you swap those out for the field goals. Well, it's a different game and it's tighter, and who knows how that thing ultimately turns out. But Kansas City controlled it, but Dallas fans, don't panic. I believe the Dallas Cowboys will be all right. And I know that everybody wants to sit here because they're the most polarizing team in sports. And it's either, hey, they're all great, or hey, they're all terrible. There's some room in between. Dallas is a really good team. I think that I don't know if they can win a Super Bowl, but I think that I'm starting to believe, even after yesterday, that they're a team that can make a playoff run. I'm worried about, Mike McCarthy as their head coach. And is he the right guy to be making those decisions in critical times? Like, that's something that I worry about. I think Aaron Rodgers bailed him out a lot up in Green Bay. So that's something that I might question a little bit, but I think they have the talent. They've got a great leader in Dak. There's a lot of poise there, and they're moving in the right direction. So Cowboys fans, don't sit here, hit the panic button, and freak out just yet. They're going to be okay. Their division isn't great. Stop the run against Philly. You'll be fine. And you drafted a heck of a linebacker in Micah Parsons, and he's going to be a difference maker and only continue to get better as the season goes on. They figured out rushing him, dropping him. You can do all the things that you want with him. He was really, in my opinion, probably the most versatile player and had an incredibly high upside, which is why you saw the Cowboys take him. And now you're starting to reap the fruits of that and everything that's going on. Put a bow on that one. Now, I want to look at probably one of the most inexplicable outcomes that you were going to see in all of the NFL. I wasn't quite sure the Texans were even really trying to win this year. They could have traded, Deshaun Watson if they wanted, probably gotten something back less than, his full market value. And that would have happened, but you start trading away Randall Cobb. I mean, you start moving on from guys and you're trying to figure out like, okay, what are we trying to do? Like, players are always playing hard. Coaches are coaching hard, but the management seemed like we're punting on this. We're trying to load up for draft picks. We'll make a move and make a run at this thing later. It doesn't make any sense how it happened. People were talking about the Tennessee Titans as replacing the Chiefs as a Super Bowl favorite. Go back a couple of weeks ago, when they beat Kansas City, like they beat Buffalo, they're all of a sudden the Titans are it. They lose Derrick Henry, but they even win without him. I wasn't ready to get the anointing oil out yet for Tennessee. They're a really good club. They've got a lot of work to do. And especially I've got to see it a little bit without Derrick Henry more than just one game, because I think he may, outside of the quarterback, be the most influential offensive player to his club in the NFL. And so while I like him, I think he's really talented, and what he's able to do, they're going to have a hard time replacing him. And so Ryan Tannehill comes in, a lot goes back onto his plate, and he wasn't up to the task. And he was playing a team yesterday. Like I said, I'm not even sure they were trying to win. 4 turnovers, 4 interceptions. I'm not going to overreact to it. Just that. If this becomes a trend, it's going to be concerning. But in a one-off situation, that's really rough. And not to mention the fact that Tennessee, it was a fairly tight game. They still were only able to rush the ball for 103 yards. That's something that they were built on, and they were riding Derrick Henry. They've got to figure out a solution because he's not going to be coming back to help them in the immediate future. 2 big observations from the NFL there. Don't overreact with Dallas. Kansas City is better than what we thought during their quote swoon. And then obviously the Titans, we're going to have to reevaluate them. And I'm going to have to see a couple weeks where they're looking good even without Derrick Henry. We saw a little reset here. Worst can be first in the NFL. That's why the term any given Sunday is out there. But with that, you have to be able to bounce back. You compartmentalize it, you put it away, and then you go and see if you can play again. So NFL coming into view. Got Thanksgiving games this weekend. We'll get into that here in the next episode. College football. What's happening now? Well, you thought with Dan Mullen, with him, moving on from his O-line coach, firing his DC Todd Grantham at Florida, that I thought his job might be safe. You looked at the remainder of his schedule: Missouri, South Carolina, or Florida State, rather. Those should be wins. You think that he would be able to accumulate, get above 500, maybe be 7-5, and go redirect and be able to move forward and hopefully recruit better this offseason and buy himself some time. Well, when you lose to Missouri in overtime, 24-23, people are going to be calling for your job. They're going to be calling for your head. And that's exactly what happens. And so fired his coaches. He has the recruiting comment that he makes a couple of weeks ago about I'll start that after the season. That's never a case. Florida's recruiting class this year isn't a great one. Florida, talk about it during the game, anything but dominant against Mizzou. And there's times where you lose games and there's some fluke things and different stuff that happens, but you play well. When you rush the ball for 38 times and you're Florida and you only gain 93 yards, that's a serious problem. Because you should have better players up front than Missouri, and you should be able to pound the football. And they were unable to do that. And that's the indictment on Dan Mullen. He's been there now for a number of years. And believe me, we'll get into all the history of this. Last season, he's playing for an SEC championship. Now they finished 8-4, but they lost to Bama by 6, the eventual national champion. They played him as well as anybody did all year. They were really stinking good. And Kyle Trask, all of a sudden, his ability to evolve, what they got out of him, the last season and a half, really, really good stuff. But they still only finished 8-4. They were embarrassed in the Cotton Bowl. They get smoked by OU, and Dan Mullen can excuse that away and say our guys didn't want to play and all this stuff. The game was televised. It happened. There were scores recorded. People watched, and there were people that were upset, and they can justify it all they want. But fans, alum, nobody wants to ever be embarrassed in that situation. And it's not like they had a record to turn back on. They won the East, they played in the championship, but they were still only 8-4. And so let's take a look here, the history of what this Florida job has been since Urban left in 2010. He obviously had a record, an unparalleled success for, a brief period. Steve Spurrier did it for a long time before him. In between there, you have Ron Zook, was hovering around 7, 8, 9 wins, but nothing really to write home about, but was never really terrible either. And so you look at the situation here. Urban leaves in 2010, and you could argue that it was bad and maybe the recruiting had fallen off and it wasn't a great situation. And he didn't leave the program in the best of shape. All right. So we'll excuse that. But it's been a decade now. It's been a decade. So you're bringing Will Muschamp. He's there 11, 12, 13, 14. He has 11-win season in 2012, but outside of that, never more than 7 wins. Can't really get that thing turned around. So he's got the one brief period of success. They tie for it in the East. They don't even win it. He's there. They get 11 wins once, but no more than 7 outside of that. They even had a 4-8 year in there, I believe. Then 15-17, Jim McElwain. He comes in. He's supposed to be the answer. Crazy yelling all over the sideline. People didn't like his demeanor. He got upset. He got furious, red-faced all the time. A little bit like Brian Kelly at Notre Dame, but he never was able to stack the wins and be able to change. But he wins 10 games, in his first season. Everything's all hunky-dory. Then wins 9 games. Then all of a sudden, winning 4 games after that, and struggling. I believe he didn't even finish the season. He's struggling there. They move on from him, but he does win 10 wins. They'll make 10 wins, but still doesn't win the SEC East or outright. Then you bring in Dan Mullen, and things were supposed to be turning around. He has 10 wins. He's got 11 wins. Still doesn't win the SEC East and isn't in solo control of that thing. And then he does last season, but they still only have 8 wins. And then you followed up this year. They're sitting here at 5-6. They'll probably beat Florida State. But my goodness, that's not what you expect out of Florida football. When I went back to research that, I felt like some of those guys did a better job. And you could argue McElwain, he started off, he was good, 10 wins, 9 wins, not terrible. But then you drop off to 4. And I think a lot of it was his demeanor. But the question becomes like, how good really is this job? How good is the Florida job? Because for the last decade, there's been some spikes, some periods where it's been good. But you look at Texas, they've kind of been in the same spot. You look at USC, they've kind of been in the same spot. Heck, Michigan has kind of been there. They've ebbed and flowed. They've went up and down. It's hard to do what Nick Saban has done. Dabo Swinney's experienced a little bit now. You saw what Urban did at Ohio State. And now Ryan Day, it is hard to stay on top and get there and then fight off everybody. Once you get to the top, fighting off everybody consistently, keeping your coaches, replacing them when they leave, it's not easy. So a lot of programs have dipped. Now, with all that being said, there's 3 premier jobs open right now in college football. USC came open first, then you had LSU, and then you have Florida now open. And so I believe Florida is the 14th job to open or turn this season. There's going to be a ton more. Heck, we might get to the point where it's close to 15 to 20% of college jobs are open this season, which would be an astronomical number, but we hit 10% and it wasn't even Thanksgiving yet. I think Florida is the best job out of all of them, followed by LSU, then USC. USC has great recruiting base. You've obviously got, a ton of boosters, a lot of stuff there, but you can't fill a stadium. When you can't fill a stadium, it's going to be hard to recruit, and guys aren't going to want to go there. That's not going to be that captivating sense of pride like it was back in the day. And so that's why they've been wandering in the wilderness, trying to figure this thing out since Pete Carroll left. With some periods where they've been good. It hasn't like every year's been 4-8, same thing. You get to 9, 10 wins a year, but then there's no sustainability because you haven't been able to stack talent on top of talent like some of these teams have done. I think LSU is after that. You've got an immense amount of talent in state. You've had success. Your last 3 coaches have all won national championships. You have unbelievable in-state talent. People want to win. You'll pay whatever. I do believe it's a highly desirable job. I just think that there's a little bit more cachet to Florida. Now, LSU fans, you're going to hate me for that, but that's somebody who is an outsider looking in, that even though they haven't had the success, I feel like Florida is just a smidge better as far as national reputation. When you've got the gator on the helmet, and maybe that's because old ball coach was there for so many years, and I was like a child of the 90s and watching these guys come up, but it just feels like if someone had the pick of their job and they didn't have alliances to either school, they had no preference, there might be just a little bit there that's going to the Florida Gators. So I think that, with that coming open, it's going to throw another wrench in plans, and all these schools are going to be in a bidding war, as we just saw Mel Tucker get $95 million. So good for Mel with all these jobs being open. Jimmy Sexton is working for him. See if James Franklin is still in play anywhere else. I don't know who they're going to fill these jobs with. Luke Fickell's a super, intense and highly thought after coaching prospect, but he's not going to USC. I don't think he's going to LSU. And for those same reasons, I don't think he's going to Florida. And so I don't know, is it Matt Campbell out of Iowa? Is there a hot assistant that someone's trying to bring in, someone from, smaller programs, but it doesn't seem like there's, a glut of high quality young coaches to fill this. And it's only more and more premier jobs seem to be opening up. I thought this one would have another year, especially after the firings and moves that Dan Mullen made. But obviously that's not going to be the case, is they are now looking for a new coach in Gainesville. Looking at some of the games that took place this weekend, Ohio State, they should probably be ranked second based upon what they did to Michigan State. If the committee believes they're the 7th best team in college football, Ohio State had 7 possessions in the first half that they didn't kneel out due to time. All 7 of them were touchdowns. Defense played really well. CJ Stroud, 32 of 35, over 400 yards passing, 6 touchdowns through the air. Heisman Trophy frontrunner now. He separated a little bit of distance between himself and Bryce Young. He's got another big one this week. Bryce has the Iron Bowl, probably not quite as much cachet, given the injury to Bo Nix and where Auburn's fallen, but he will probably have the trump card at the end with Georgia. So we'll have to wait and see till that final weekend. And I hope the voters hold their cards to see exactly what happens through these last couple of games, just so we know exactly what each one of these guys are in big moments. But Ohio State dominant. They can beat Georgia if their O-line holds up. That's the reality. They've got elite receivers. Their defense is starting to play better. And as you saw with Bama last year, defense, as good as it is, it's tough to rely on that to win games. If you can score points, you can just outscore teams. And that is going to be a methodology and a pathway for victory now in 2021. Georgia has bucked that all season long, but they also haven't had a team that's been able to score like Ohio State. So I hope that ends up being the national championship game, because I want to see worlds collide, clash of the Titans, offense versus defense. You could get that with Georgia and Ohio State, and I think it'll be a tremendous game ultimately to watch. Bama and Arkansas. I'm going to go out on a limb, and it shouldn't be a limb that I'm on by myself, but Bryce Young played great. Jameson Williams played great. The pass that Bryce Young threw to Jameson Williams to put Bama up by 2 scores, and I believe put them right in the realm of 42 points. I believe on that 3rd and 10, that post that was thrown, that ball hits the ground, it moves. And as great as an attempt and effort it was, it should not have been called a completion. It shouldn't have been. The ball moves and it can touch the ground, but it can't shift while it's touching the ground. That ball moved and tipped when his hand was no longer under it. You could see them sliding apart and the ball shifting. You felt like it was a little bit of home cooking by the SEC to get the matchup that they wanted. If I'm Arkansas, if I'm Pittman, I am furious about that. And here's the thing. I don't know if Bama, if that impacts the ability of them to win the game. They were still up by a score. There was more scoring that happened after that. Arkansas obviously gets another one on the board. I don't know if that impacts the game, but I do know Bama should have been staring at a 4th and 10 and probably punting the football right there. It's a nice ball by Bryce. Great effort by Jameson, who is one of the fantastic receivers in all of college football. He's incredibly athletic, does a great job running routes, and he has saved Bama, and he did it again in that game with the big plays that he makes, because Bama's defense has been inconsistent this year. It's been exposed some. And so we'll see if they're able to score at a high enough clip to kind of outscore Georgia. Great play by those guys. Shouldn't have been a catch. Shouldn't have counted. Anyway, Bama survives and advances. They got the Iron Bowl coming up. We'll get into that later. Utah taking on Oregon. This is something that everybody looked at all season. It was bound to happen. Oregon been playing with fire. They finally played a team that was very similar to them, and they get boat raced 38-7. It wasn't even really as close as it even sounded with the scoreboard. Utah was able to dominate the game in the first half, really separate, ran the football pretty well, over 200 yards rushing. It was a clean game. It wasn't like there were turnovers or anything like that, that impacted the balance of the game. That wasn't the issue. The issue was just Oregon's inability to stop Utah's rushing attack. And more games are lost than won in the NFL, and that's probably true in college football as well. Oregon punting with no time left, basically on the clock before half. This is situational football. I've been over it with just about every NFL coach that I played with. You have less than 5 seconds left. It's 4th down. If you punt it, you could get it blocked. They could return it. Don't give them the ball back. Drop your quarterback back and have him bomb that thing 50 yards down the field and out of bounds. The clock ticks till it hits. All of a sudden, the half's over, game's over. You get to the locker room. Instead, Oregon punts it, and they punt it in the middle of the field. At least punt it out of bounds. You got the punt off so it didn't get blocked. That's a positive. Then punt it out of bounds. Don't give them the return. And when you watch Utah's return man running that thing back with no time left on the clock, you're just sitting there scratching your head saying, that's bad football. It's bad ball. It's bad ball. And I would expect more than that out of Mario Cristobal, who I think his teams are generally very well coached and well-disciplined. It probably doesn't impact the outcome of that game, but it's just situational football and understanding what's going on and knowing how you need to get it done and how you should operate. Bad situation there for Mario Cristobal. They got to get that cleaned up. They're out of the playoff hunt now for the most part, unless utter chaos ensues. So we'll see what happens. They'll probably replay Utah in the Pac-12 championship, and we'll see that game in a couple of weeks. One other game that I think would have been circled at the beginning of the year as a huge one. You have, the 13th ranked Sooners taking on the Iowa State Cyclones. Oklahoma had to win this if they would have any shot at potentially getting back into the playoff conversation. They're going to have Bedlam this week. That's a chance there. Iowa State, underwhelming season. This was the chance for them to play spoiler. And, Brock Purdy has a nice game, but they can't run the ball with Brees Hall. Oklahoma rather does a fantastic job of bottling up the run, and in doing so is able to win that game. And so if they win Bedlam, maybe you get a rematch with Baylor. We'll see who the top two teams are since it's the round robin formula in the Big 12. Maybe one of those teams would be able to squeak in should Bama lose and other chaos ensues. Cincinnati loses. I don't think Notre Dame's losing to Stanford to close out the season, but we'll see kind of how all that shakes out as the season kind of progresses and everything moves on. My playoff rankings prediction, you're going to have Georgia at number 1 Tuesday night. I think you have Ohio State at number 2 with how well they played, and absolutely 49-0 at halftime against the 7th ranked team in the country. I think you have Bama at 3. Cincinnati, who looked really good against SMU, got back on the horse. They played a very clean, crisp game, scored a lot of points, a convincing win over a ranked opponent. So Cincinnati should be back in that conversation, sitting there at 4, with Michigan at 5. I think Notre Dame at 6. Okie State, with Wake Forest losing to Clemson, I think they slide in there at number 7. And then it's like, who do you want to kind of fill in there? I think Ole Miss, I think Baylor, and then Oklahoma kind of round out the top 10. So kind of a diverse look right here. There's still one more week to play. Some of these conference championship games aren't locked up. You got Ohio State, Michigan this week. You got Bedlam. You got Alabama, Auburn, which isn't as big as it could have been with Bo Nix. But I can't wait. We'll be able to dive into that later this week. Thanksgiving edition of Carp's Corner will be coming up to you later on. But enjoy this. Love talking about it. College football almost there. And we still have, 5, 6, 7 weeks of the NFL left as we hammer through the playoffs. Going to be a good time. Thanks for tuning in.